In today's episode, we shift our focus to the heart of the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit, the work that is not often seen but is essential in helping us to understand crime. So to start us along this journey is Sir David Simmons, whose depth of experience and years-long leadership at the helm of the criminal justice system sets the perfect foundation for this important conversation. I'm Joshua Hinkson. Now, how did you envision the task force contributing to crime prevention and the development of sound evidence-based justice policy, as well as national decision-making and also strengthening the public's confidence in the criminal justice system?
Well, quite simply, I thought that if we were able to introduce a new way of looking at the problem of crime, that ultimately we would generate sufficient data that could be sent to the police or worked with the police to help design strategies or work with, because it was an interagency situation, work, for example, with the Ministry of Education and Youth Affairs, I think it was called at the time. And we even interacted with the Ministry of Social Transformation. And so that we would give them the results of surveys that we did. And they would be able to fashion and develop programs aimed and targeted at those particular things that we found. That's what we envisioned, and that was indeed encapsulated in the terms of reference that I read just now. We found Miss Yolande Ford, who was a Barbadian who had done extremely well academically. She had been to my own University of London School of Economics also as an Arabara scholar. And she had the benefit, whereas I studied with Errol Hall Williams, she studied with Robert Reiner. Both of them are well-known criminologists. Reiner was later than Hall Williams, of course. And I met her, I think it was in England on a trip, and I was very impressed. And she willingly came back and took it upon her back to get that off the ground. And the first thing she did was to use self-reporting techniques to go into the prison and interview a number of prisoners who formed a sample to examine what influences operated in their minds to cause them to commit crime. And I thought she did a fantastic job. And nobody in Barbados had done it before. You know how this society is. You get criticism. There was a little carping criticism, but apart from one or two people, I think her work was generally well appreciated. And she found, the fantastic thing about that study was that it showed that among the male population of the prison, probably nearly 97% of the population of the prison at the time was male, you had factors, or what they call criminal risk factors, which predisposed to crime, that aligned with the international evidence. So that maternal deprivation, poor socialization, not going to church, not interested in church at all, poverty, all these sorts of things were found among the prison population in Barbados as what we call criminal risk factors, which could have operated in favor of one of those fellas going to commit crime. But I'm saying that those findings, that evidence, harmonize with what the international evidence, criminological evidence, was showing at the time. Similar kinds of factors. whether you were in a developing society like Barbados or a developed society like USA or England, similar factors operated. So it now was left to, for example, the Ministry of Education to set up programs to deal with those children who were low achievers and so on.
I had a small staff here. The Secretariat of the then National Task Force on Crime Prevention was also an advisory panel, and so involved discussions, lengthy discussions would have been had as to what that would look like in terms of a research plan. It was decided that we had a captive audience, to use the term, of criminals, offenders, convicted persons in Glenderry Prison at the time. And I determined that that would become the criminal laboratory. That's where I would do the research. It had to be socially scientific, it had to be sound, based on the vision and the mission and the mandate of the Attorney General's office at the time. So a random sample was taken of inmates at the then Glenderry prison. And as I said, the sample was randomized. So it being randomized contributed to the robust scientific nature of the research. 110 inmates were interviewed at that time, and all of the women. A formal report was never done on the women, but this report speaks to the findings within the male population of Glenderry Prison. And because the sample is big enough, or the sample was big enough at that time and randomized, you would be able to impute that. I wouldn't go into all the statistical analysis or the statistics that would have been used, but it would have been a large enough sample, a randomized sample, so no one was handpicked to be interviewed, that you can impute that, okay, this is a reflection of what is going on in the general population at Glenderry, general prison population at Glenderry Prison. Now, the interview instrument was divided into 6 sections. One of the areas, and interviewers, I should interject here that I did some of the interviews, but interviewers were employed as well. So external interviewers were trained, and all of the interviews were done at the prison. So, as was the case overseas, I spent a lot of time in prison. I spent a lot of time in Glenderry. I got to know the place very well, and the men got to know me quite well as well. They were brought, if they needed to be handcuffed or shackled, they were handcuffed or shackled. It was never done within the earshot of any of the prison officers. So as I would have also done in other countries and other jurisdictions, you can be within sight, which you might need for safety purposes, security purposes, but not within earshot. So, not so much here, but in other jurisdictions, all kinds of things were told to me. But if they were not relevant to the research I was doing, because I'm looking for data, I'm not looking here for individual features. I'm looking for data to inform government, well, not just government, but national policy and programming. Because it goes beyond government. Government are not the sole purveyors of crime prevention in this or in any other country. They are not.
Now, speaking of government, we also spoke with Attorney General Dale Marshall, under whose aegis the Office of the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit falls. The Attorney General shared his insights into the vital role of sound, credible research in shaping policy, guiding national responses, and strengthening the fight against crime.
It is quite possible to achieve results based on intuition and instinctive responses. But when it comes to investing resources when it comes to trying to have certainty in terms of policy, it is always going to be vital that the state has the benefit of informed decision making, and that can only happen if you have proper analysis and appropriate research. The matter of dealing with the criminal justice system in any country, therefore, has to be based, it has to have a firm foundation on research. We have to research where the criminal element is coming from, what are the kinds of factors that contribute to it. We have to look at the statistics. And so it goes without saying that the work of the Criminal Justice Research Unit, Project Unit, has been invaluable in assisting not just the Office of the Attorney General, really, but a huge raft of government initiatives dealing with social services, dealing with rehabilitation, dealing with societal change. And therefore, a lot of what government has been doing, certainly in the last few years, but for the entire life of the unit, has been based on the output of that unit. We could not be where we are today unless we had the benefit of the solid research that's been done.
Now, Attorney General, it's quite fortuitous or interesting that we actually sit in Parliament right now, and you mentioned any decision making at the highest level of government, the state, must be informed and based on research. Now, that being said, could you point to any particular legislation, programming, or policy perhaps that has been birthed from the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit and has stood the test of time today?
Well, it would be difficult to identify a specific thing, but let's look at it this way. When we are considering the question of making an investment in policing, and we have to fund the work of the police. When we are considering making an investment in aspects of education, when we are considering making an investment in elements of the social service component of government, all of these things, as I've said before, benefit from that research. So I couldn't point to a specific statute that we have enacted because of the research of the unit, but I can tell you that the research of the unit contributes to the whole exercise of distillation of exactly what the problem is, where the hotspots are, how we deal with the hotspots. So you wouldn't find a particular legislative instrument, but certainly in terms of some of our policing efforts, some of our social service efforts, they would all, many of them would have the fingerprint, more or less, of the unit.
With that foundation set, we turn now to Kurt Goodridge, Senior Research Analyst with the CJRPU. So while the Attorney General focused on how research helps to shape policing processes and public policy, Mr. Goodridge takes us into the Barbados Crime Observatory, where that work is produced and applied. Now, first of all, I want you to set the scene and enlighten the public about your role as Senior Research Analyst with the unit, and also what exactly is the Barbados Crime Observatory.
Okay, so my role is a pretty broad role. I'm in charge of analyzing all of the research that comes to the department. So basically every study that comes into the department, it crosses my desk at some point in time. Even though individual officers do end up working on various projects and various studies, at some point in time, that study will cross my desk for me to do some sort of analysis. Sometimes I do the entire analysis of the study. Sometimes I do a smaller subset of the analysis, but I do an analysis of that. In terms of the Barbados Crime Observatory, it's basically a repository for all the crime that happens in Barbados. So essentially, we document and catalog every single crime that goes on, or happens, or occurs in Barbados, and we produce reports, policy briefings, mock-ups, write-ups, whatever it is, based on that data. So that's what the Barbados Crime Observatory really does.
I want you to also go back and tell us a bit about its establishment, the BCO, and what led to the establishment of the Crime Observatory.
So that was established back in 2012. It was an agreement between several Caribbean islands and the OECS countries. And then it was updated in 2022. 2022 is when we began becoming a little bit more serious about pursuing the Barbados Crime Observatory. This was in line with UNCTS, and we were trying to follow the suit of some of the visionaries and pioneers in the industry, such as the Belize Crime Observatory. So we would have done a study tour to Belize back in 2022, and that's when we decided to really get serious about pursuing the Barbados Crime Observatory. It really and truly was operational, but it became fully operational and started producing its first set of reports last year. So that was the inspiration behind bringing out the Barbados Crime Observatory. We wanted to be able to be the one-stop agency in Barbados for everyone to look up for the various crimes, whether it be statistics on what's going on, whether it be policies on what can we do, tips on how to combat certain crimes, areas of where to look out for, various things like that. That's what we wanted to have the Barbados Crime Observatory, and we're still building towards that. But at the Barbados Crime Observatory, we look at more than just the face value. We try to get underneath it. And there are a lot of other currents that are flowing underneath that, other than hard times or economic hardships that have pushed people to be behaving like this. Again, we have another study that's going to be coming out at the end of October on the social histories of violent offenders under the age of 25 that we would have just done at the Barbados Prison Service. And you're going to see in that a lot of tenets coming out that prove to you that while socioeconomic hardship is a factor in it, it's not the be all and end all for the propulsion of these robberies. You have factors such as a lack of education, lack of proper job opportunities, and when the report is released to the public, you will see that these all tie into each other. So that started the work that we do at the Barbados Crime Observatory. We don't just produce stats for the public, we analyze the stats to try to understand the driving forces behind the stats, try to help the public understand, well, yes, we may have seen a spike in this particular crime, but what is the force driving that crime? Is it a one-off occurrence, or is it something that is going to be continuing? That's what we do here at the Barbados Crime Observatory.
So how does the CJRPU ensure findings are presented in a way that policymakers, practitioners, and even the public understands and could translate these statistics into programs, actions, initiatives?
I'm going to use a phrase here, horses for courses. So as I said, we produce quarterly reports. The report that we would send to the Attorney General is not going to be the same report that we would produce to give to the public. We tailor the reports according to the audience that is going after. So the Attorney General may get more in-depth details and more legal or criminogenic or criminological jargon, whereas the public is going to get data that is presented in a way that is understandable for them. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, here in this report, we can tell the public how much major crime has increased. This would have been the mid-year report that would have been completed at the end of June, and you would see that major crimes would have increased by 42%. That's information that we would present to the public. We would tell them how much crimes in each category has gone up. But the Attorney General would then get a different report. That he would get this same report, but he'd get a little bit more information. So he'd see it was in a particular area. These are the age groups that are engaged in this particular crime. So it all depends on who we are presenting the data to. So we present data in a way that is useful to the agency that we're dealing with. Probation, we may give them information on the ages or the age groups of the young persons that are engaged in certain crimes, because they deal with particular people, so they know we want them to have the information as to how best to target that particular age group. We look at the organization like MENS, or More Empowerment, who deals with youth and disadvantaged youth. So we're going to give them information on the youth or the demographics that they target. So we give each organization information based on the demographic that they target. And information, and these organizations also come to us. Mm-hmm. So they know if they want particular information, they can come to us, and we will give them the information that they wanted for their particular purpose. So the information is, well, it's very general. It can always be tailored to each specific organization.
As a charity that has witnessed the value of research translating into action, what message would you offer about the importance of sustaining evidence-based collaboration in national development efforts, but specifically crime prevention and turning our young people away from a life of crime?
Let me put it this way, the data is not going to jump off the paper and do the job. So therefore, we would want to encourage other charities like ours and others to take a hold of the data because it has value. Oftentimes in our society, there is talk about things, research being done, and it's sitting somewhere.
Yeah.
So the value comes then in taking that research and putting programs together and letting them guide our projects, our programs, so that we can help, we can work together, continue the synergy in working together and helping turn not only our young people, but our families around, our parents, our seniors, that may see things one way, so that we can help to bring about the change that is needed.
Yeah, and added to that too, when you have the research, and as you said, we put our programs in place, looking back at because when you do your sessions, you look from one year to the next and you do the comparison. So once we continue to get the data and we continue to act upon that and we be proactive and we put these programs in place, then we ourselves can look and analyze and say, well, look, last year X, Y, and Z, and then we can see the improvement, or we can see where we've fallen down. So I think it's very important to continue to have it, even though you would have mentioned people may see it as academic. It's very, very important. So I think it's really important to continue to have it so that we can gauge how we are doing, whether good, bad, or where we need to improve.
Director, how does your unit ensure that your research and statistical analysis moves off of the paper into policy and actions? How is that mapping done?
It is always important to contextualize data to specific problems that you have identified within the community. How we get it done is that we coordinate meetings with all the stakeholders, including the target population, and we present our findings to them. This is what we are seeing. These are the risk factors that we have gleaned from our research. These are the schools that need immediate attention. And based on that, organizations who are working with the youth, who are working with the schools and so on, they are able then to design their programs based on the findings so that the risk factors that we identify, they are addressing those risk factors in their programming. We also work closely with the Division of Youth Affairs because they're in the communities working with young people. We work closely with the National Peace Program. We actually sit with the National Peace Program to assist them in designing programs based on our research. So nothing is done in terms of intervention with the young people now that it's based on anecdotal information. We cannot afford as a country now to rely on gut feeling or to be misguided in where we believe we need to target our resources. So it is all research driven so that interventions are targeting the specific areas they need to target and the specific age group that they need to target as well. When we adopt this type of strategy, it saves resources, meaning that you are not wasting resources where they are not needed. And as well, you have the biggest bang for your buck because you are specifically targeting at-risk populations with your finances and with your resources. So that's how we are able to move our research findings from paper into actual programs that we see being piloted across Barbados.
Could you provide us perhaps with some examples of how research done but currently by the Barbados Crime Observatory has been translated into interventions and programs perhaps through the Barbados Police Service or a more empowerment network and MENS, as you mentioned?
Well, The King's Trust is one program that we target. They work very closely. The police work closely with us. They, as you mentioned, Amar Empowerment. We also have Mr. Sargent, who runs the men's group.
Yeah.
And he was able in a public forum to indicate that his programs now are based on the evidence that he obtained from the department. Also, the Division of Youth Affairs, when they're planning programs, they also utilize our data. We work very closely with the National Council on Substance Abuse for them to develop and to be able to garner information for their burden report. Based on our research, on our statistics, they're able to complete that so that their school interventions and so on are based on the evidence coming from the Barbados Crime Observatory. You spoke about the 11 Plus program. That was one of our babies. When Justice Cook-Aline, she was juvenile magistrate at the time, when she approached us with what she was seeing coming out of the juvenile justice system, we were able to sit with her based on what she said to us and develop a program, 11 Plus program, targeting at-risk youth.
What would you like Barbadians to know about the CJRPU and its important work that we may not have known before?
I want them to know that if they require or desire to have information, conduct research, know what is happening as far as crime is concerned, this department can provide that answer for them. I want to see this department as a clearinghouse for our criminal justice research, and that it is a place where persons can come and get not anecdotal information, but factual information on crime. Because sometimes when you go through social media, you see all type of things there that are not based on research evidence. People think that as soon as there's a murder, that all young people are involved in these types of crimes, and that the murders are predatory and they need to be fearful, and Barbados is not a safe place. So in order to debunk some of what we are seeing on social media, we want this department to be here as an area where persons can call and get information on crime and criminal justice and how to go about making sure that they protect themselves and their families from being soft targets to crime.